the Tour de France 2022 has finished. The best Grand Boucle of the last 20 years, in which we've seen how the former Danish fisherman Jonas Vingegaard has followed in the wake of his doped compatriot Bjarne Riis and becomes the second rider of his country to win the yellow jersey. Quite a feat in an epic duel against a real monster, the Slovenian Tadej Pogacar, who, following the trend of his compatriots, has not been able to achieve the goal of getting his third consecutive victory. Although he has been a great rival who has provided the necessary show for new cycling fans to join in front of their TVs to watch the sport of cycling again. Do you want to hear the best summary of the Tour de France 2022? Well, without further ado, let the show begin. The cleanest tour in history, according to the media hacks. Normal, since in the last 2 years there have been no positives for doping in the World Tour. In a magnificent propaganda strategy of the French president of the UCI, Le Partenaire, this clean sport has brought us in this last edition the fastest Tour de France of all time, surpassing no more and no less than the 2005 edition, in which Dr. Ferrari faced Dr. Fuentes in a competition worthy of a Dragon Ball episode, and in which the main hero, the Super Saiyan Lance Armstrong, obtained a doped triumph over authentic mutants, such as Mini Barillo and the son of Rodicio. And all this after the first 3 days of this edition of the Tour de France, which took place in Denmark, and were a real dump in which the cyclists hardly wanted to pedal. So you can imagine the immense speeds that these heroes who, as clean as they are, could fly in a heatwave at more than 36 degrees Celsius during several days of this edition. One of the teams that could not demonstrate their tremendous cleanliness was Bahrain Victorious, a team that in the previous edition obtained 3 victories, with Dylan Tunes and of course the Slovenian who silenced the public that suspected the doping of his team, Matej Mohoric. Just a year earlier, the reigning Milan-San Remo champion took advantage of his telescopic seat post and attacked with more than 90 kilometers to go for one of his incredible stage wins. This year, after a police raid in Copenhagen days before the start of the Tour de France to seize doping substances, our tooted friend dropped Quinn Simmons in the only stage where he wanted to contest the stage win. It seemed that he didn't have that radioactive energy of the previous year. A strange year for the Victorious team, without their convalescent Colbrelli, who must have watched on his TV set with dismay the race where last year he was destroying the best climbers in the mountains, especially when the team's best rider, in a surprise 14th place, was the young man who turns 39 in November, Luis Leon Sanchez, making a supreme tribute to his old connections with Dr. Ferrari and Dr. Fuentes. He was not the only name to shine in this Tour de France. We have also seen promising youngsters like the British multi-tool Tom Pidcock make his mark in professional cycling. He finished 17th in his first Tour de France, in which he will always be remembered for his epic victory in Alpe d'Huez. That day, the little Olympic mountain bike champion gave us both satisfaction and relief at the same time by winning ahead of a very recovered white Kenyan Chris Froome, who watched on impassively as the youngster crushed him on the ascent of the 21 hairpins, as he himself did in those years when he performed exhibitions of real epoca. Perhaps Pidcock had also followed the advice of Sir Dave Brailsford for that climb, in which he kept taking seconds and seconds off his rivals in the breakaway, because according to his own teammates, Luke Rowe and Geraint Thomas, who was on the podium of the Tour at the bizarre age of 36, the young British Pidcock looked like he had just returned from a rave party. And of course, with so much excitement that he could only sleep 2 hours, something typical in the healthy and clean athletes who have participated in this fantastic Tour de France. But above all the other teams, 2 teams who have stood out from the rest, obtaining the first 2 places in the general classification and winning 9 stages with 4 different riders. Let's start talking about UAE Postal, which, as we have already warned you in February, had made big signings to surround Tadej Pogacar with the best gregarios possible to get his third consecutive victory in Paris. And the performances could not have been much better on the first mountain days. The Polish Rafał Majka, who had been in complete decline for years since he stopped eating steak in the Tinkoff Saxo team of Alberto Contador and Bjarne Riis, became a real peloton destroyer on the summits, being by far the best gregario of Poggi. And as you well know, what suits some people very well sits with others very badly. This was the case of George Bennett, the New Zealander carrier pigeon of Jumbo-Visma, who, while eating breakfast alone in a bubble, ended up infected with COVID. Poor thing. This is the same as what happened to Mark Hirschi, the Swiss rider who has totally disappeared from top competition since he signed a millionaire contract with the team of Mauro Gianetti and Machine. A team of clean examples, closing up the back of the peloton every day, finishing 127th of 135 riders in this round of France. At the back of the peloton also finished every day the Danish Mikkel Bjerg, 124th in the general classification, 5 hours behind his compatriot Vingegaard. But at least he could give us one of those moments for history, because after being left behind on the Col du Granon, he underwent a miraculous recovery and was placed on the front of the bunch, leading it in Orquet en Gizan, a sinewy mountain pass where he left several of his rivals completely exhausted, thanks to the same machine formula that produced shady characters like David de la Fuente, Juan José Cobo and Leonardo Piepoli. The best thing is that the man who took over from him that day, the gringo Brandon McNulty, did the biggest damage done by a cyclist since the darkest epocha of the Sky team, 4 days before the end of the fastest Tour de France in history. At pace, he dropped each and every rider, until he was left with only his leader, Pogacar and the yellow jersey. An impressive performance for a good rider, indeed. A great rider, but who had never performed at the level of Richie Porte or Roberto Eras in a Grand Tour. You know, the classic gregario who climbs faster than the leaders of other teams. And worst of all, his breakfast was not the full brunch that his teammates Rafał Majka and Marc Soler, who should have taken his place in that infamous Pyrenees stage, had. Poggi's friend, Rafał Majka, was unable to start that day because of a muscle injury. We'll have to believe that in a sport where this kind of situation hardly ever happens, a chain coming off the bike leaves Poggi's best climbing partner out of the game. And of course, we'll also have to believe that the Spaniard Soler had a very bad dessert the day before, because after having eaten an ice cream in the middle of the breakaway, the former Tour de l'Avenir champion started to feel dizzy and vomit right after the rest day, reminding us of great success stories like TJ Van Garderen or Mikel Landa, amongst others. He was received as a hero after reaching the finish line, perhaps to remove that legend of laziness that is observed in him in all the documentaries that his former team made for Netflix. All these normal and credible situations underpin a second place for Pogacar that may seem insufficient, but in reality has made him a star for the July-only followers of cycling. A Poggi who perhaps did not prepare as he should have for the Tour de France, and who felt superior to his rivals, received a great lesson in humility on the Col du Granon, giving the spectators a tour full of attacks, ambush attempts, 3 impressive stage wins, and plans prepared in the hyperbaric chambers of Kolobnev that make him a hero for many of the fans who admire his charismatic personality. It could not be less in the country that adored the second grandfather of the missing in this tour, Van der Poel. This Slovenian super champion had to be defeated by the most credible and at the same time entertaining team of the last years. The team of Jumbo-Visma, here of the Rabobank squad with the doped Bogart, Rasmussen, Menchov and Decker. In principle, they came with the skier Primož Roglič as Pogacar's main rival, because our tattooed snow lover had overcome an emotional slump during the spring and came as the brand new winner of the Critérium de Dauphiné. He was far from up to the task, crashing on the pavé stage and losing time to his teammate Vingegaard in the early mountain stages. until he was finally used as a shuttle for Pogacar to take the bait on the Col du Granon and start to lose the Tour. He left days later without an explanation. Without being sick, unwilling to work for the Dane. He will never again be Jumbo's leader for this race. Rabobank was superlative, with the likes of Van Hooijdonk, Tish Benoot and Stefan Kruijswijk in stellar form, surrounding Pogacar on the Galibier stage and protecting Vingegaard for any attempted attacks by UAE Postal. Even with crashes and abandonments by the Dutch, Vingegaard was always protected by two men. The first was Frenchman Christophe Laporte, who, not content with being a great support rider on the flat and undulating terrain, continued his spectacular campaign with several breakaway attempts and a remarkable victory by jumping in the last kilometres, in true classical Mano Luigi style. The second, the best rider of this Tour de France, even though he finished 22nd overall. Wout van Aert would deserve a whole chapter of cycling stories after his nauseating Tour de France 2022, in which he has been every day. And when we say every day, it's absolutely every day. The 21 days of this Tour de France, being in the news for being in the breakaways, protecting his teammates in key moments, riding, leading in the peloton, sprinting in the mass bunch of rivals, winning for the second consecutive year the long final time trial, and with an image for history in which he alone, and after several days in the breakaway, including that day, Van Aert destroyed the Tour de France champion himself on the ascent to Haute de Cam, thus adding one more photo to those of Kobo, Piepoli, Bjarne Riis and Miguel Indurain, amongst other notorious exhibitions. Of course, he broke the all-time record for points in the green jersey classification, the goal that was set at the beginning of the Tour by our long-missed Belgian cyclocross champion. More than 637 kilometres in the breakaway in the most important stages, 3 stage victories, including 4 second places in a Tour de France that should make him the second highest paid cyclist on the planet, and that makes him the main favourite to win the Road Cycling World Championships. We will hardly see such a performance in the Gallic Round for many, many years. And who has profited from such a job has been the fisherman, Jonas Vingegaard, who we have to believe his epic story of transformation from nothing in August 2020 to Tour champion in July 2022. In this period, he has become the best climber in the world, as well as being a notorious time trialist and road racer. Many will remember the image of Vingegaard waiting for Pogacar after the Slovenian's crash on the descent of Spandele, but I'll remember the pale blonde slowing down in the final time trial at Rocamadour, so that his Belgian teammate could take the win that day. The son of Denmark, country of Kim Andersen, Bjarne Riis, Michael Rasmussen and TUE lifetime rider Jakob Fuglsang, has taken the baton from Michele Ferrari's friend and has flown the flag of the Viking Cross as no one had done so far by winning the Queen Stage of the Alps and the Queen Stage of the Pyrenees. He learnt in the 2021 edition what the weak points of Tadej Pogacar were, and he knew how to finish him off in the high mountains at more than 2,000 metres of altitude, where the Slovenian suffers more than anywhere else. And he knew how to take shelter in March when Poggi was blowing him up on the climbs of Tirreno Adriatico to save his best fireworks for July. Yes, he has enjoyed the best team of the race, and yes, he has less charisma than Richard Nixon surrounded by hippies in the Woodstock fields, but he has worn yellow in Paris at 25 years of age. The UCI and the ASO have made the perfect move. They have created the clean enemy of the new cycling cannibal, Tadej Pogacar, who may abandon his dreams of conquering all the races in the calendar to focus again on the Tour de France. Because, unfortunately, July cycling is the one that pays for all those wonderful ketones and clean products with which these heroes enliven our summers.